How's it going, guys? Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're going to enjoy this podcast. It's a subject probably close to my heart, you could say. I'm kind of passionate about this, and it'll be explained as I go through. And before I get onto the title of the podcast, I want to ask you a question. And this, I kind of want to make this interactive. Obviously, we can't be interactive live because it's recorded. But if you had a pen and paper, or even using notes on your phone, I am posing some questions within this podcast that I invite you to spend a bit of time answering. And you can answer them afterwards. The questions will be in the show notes. Or indeed, you could just pause the episode and answer the questions then. Give yourself a couple of minutes. But I heard a great quote, and I'm not sure it's from Socrates. I think it's from Socrates, and that he said, "I cannot teach any man anything. I can only make him think." And I love that quote. And when we write, obviously, we use the creative part of our brain. So we can really create, we really think deeply. Okay, so that's what I invite you to do. The title of the podcast is Alcohol, a Relationship Worthy of Consideration. And why I chose these words, why I entitled it this is a training I did for our Telos members. And I didn't want to call it alcohol, why you shouldn't drink it, because that's ridiculous. We're all adults, at least in Telos we are anyway. So I wanted to just provide a training to facilitate some consideration. And when you think about the few words here, a relationship is anything that's connected. So we can have a relationship, obviously, with other people, other human beings, but we can have relationships with other things, whether it's nature, the ocean, whatever it might be. So you are connected to alcohol in some way. What is that connection? When did that form? How is it with you? And consideration is described or defined as something like careful thought, typically over a period of time. So rather than just making a split decision, it's consideration. And for myself now, as I speak right now, it is November 2024, and I first gave up alcohol like 8 years ago. Okay, when I say gave up, I went on my break from alcohol. I saw this 90-day challenge. I ended up going 9 months, and I learned so much. But over that first 9 months changed my relationship with alcohol. But yeah, I've learned more in the last while. And actually, over the last 22 months, I haven't drank at all. So I'm close to 2 years. And it massively surprised me. So I heard something else recently. You can never learn less about a subject. You can only learn more. And really, I've learned so much over this last 8 years, particularly this last 22 months. And I wanted to share that. Okay. So that's why it's called a relationship worthy of consideration. If you're drinking alcohol regularly, it's holding you back from being your best self. Agree or disagree? Okay, consider that. I tend to agree. If you're drinking alcohol regularly, especially if you're drinking a significant amount of alcohol regularly, if you were binge drinking regularly, okay, and this is something I did without question for close to a quarter of a century, again, without question. But it's hard. It's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, actually, to gain muscle, improve cardiovascular fitness, if you're drinking alcohol regularly. Can you be at your best mentally, professionally, personality, relationships-wise, health-wise? Can you be at your best health-wise if you're consuming this drug? I would tend to agree with that statement. And to go into it, I want to talk about initially the context in which I am delivering this training. And there's a fair bit of context to look at. And first of all, I suppose I'm delivering this in Ireland, in Europe, which is a country that consumes a large amount of alcohol, as we know. And it's completely different to any other drug I was going to say on the market, but that's the That's the black market, I suppose, because most other drugs, okay, pharmaceutical drugs aside, are illegal. But it's pretty much different, completely different to any other recreational drug. It's legal for a start. It's heavily advertised. It's just accepted as normal in our culture. We've been surrounded with it from birth. And yeah, it's just accepted in a way that other drugs wouldn't be. Okay. So this is the kind of context we're looking at. We've been exposed to it. And I was considering this on the last, I did a podcast on this a few years ago. And again, I've learned a bit more since. I used to think my relationship with alcohol started when I was about 16 or 17, whenever I had my first beer, probably 15 or 16 or whatever it was. But I've realized that that's wrong, because I've been exposed to alcohol since birth. I would have been crawling around as a baby at Christmas on my grandparents' living room floor, whilst the family got together, the larger family got together and were enjoying or having a few drinks. I would have smelt it young, for example. So that's been a huge part of my subconscious memories. Okay, alcohol has been around. It's just all I've ever known. And we obviously drink it in every occasion from birth to death. When you think about it, obviously the babies don't, but christenings, wet the baby's head, communions, birthdays, weddings, stag and hen do's, weekend nights out, confirmations, funerals, office parties, business lunches, events, holidays, Saturday night, Friday nights, midweek pints, sporting occasions, more and more. And we drink to drown our sorrows. We drink to relax. We drink to celebrate. We drink to reminisce. It's intertwined so heavily in our psyche, in our subconscious, in our memories, in our culture. And culture is just what a bunch of people do, essentially. You can have a culture in a business. You can have certain families will have certain cultures, and obviously cultures in society and countries. Okay, so it's just a huge part of our culture. And I don't think we appreciate this because we are in that culture. Each and every one of us have been surrounded by this, have been inundated with advertising, have seen our friends, family, parents, brothers, sisters, acquaintances, work colleagues, everyone around us drink as long as we live, as long as we've been alive. And it's hard to extract ourselves from that. Okay, so this is part of the context I want to explain. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to have a few images up. I've popped up an image here of alcohol consumption per person in 2019 from the World Health Organization, and it's a map of the world. And its estimated consumption of alcohol is measured in liters of pure alcohol per person, age 15 years or older. So yeah, you could just Google image it if you want, but it'd be on the YouTube channel. But it's interesting. It's a color-coded map, and the darkest colors are the countries that drink the most, and the lightest are the countries that drink the least. And what it goes from is from 0 liters to 20 liters of pure alcohol. So I'm not talking about 20 liters of wine. I'm talking about 100% pure alcohol on average over the course of a year. And it's very interesting because immediately when I look at it, swathes of the planet don't drink an awful lot. There's whole countries that barely drink at all, the likes of Indonesia, North Africa, the Middle East, of course. And then there's countries that drink less. Like I was surprised at Italy is significantly lighter than Ireland, for example, and even France. But you consider it, they enjoy probably a more, basically less amounts. I'm thinking of fine Italian wines, for example. North Africa is very light. But then you see America is considerably less than Europe. You have South America, Central America. And then there's like India and China that drink very little when you consider the populations there. So again, coming back to the context, we are living in a country that drink excessively. It's normal for us, all right? And again, when you think of culture, something in our culture that's normal is abnormal to someone outside of our culture or in a very different culture. you may look at other cultures, and it might be to do with anything else, religion or what have you, and you think that's completely bizarre. That is so crazy that they do this. Um, but yeah, we look at our behavior as normal. So what I want you to do is try to question this from a very neutral, culture neutral place, if you like. Okay. Just some figures that I found are quite interesting, and these vary, but they're quite similar from a few different sources. But in 2019, the average person in Ireland, aged 15 plus, drank 10.8 litres of pure alcohol in a year, which is the equivalent of 40 bottles of vodka per year or 113 bottles of wine per year, which is 2.17 bottles of wine per week. So imagine 2 bottles of wine, all right? Obviously, you can get a 15% alcohol per volume bottle of South African red wine, which will, blow the socks off you. Or you can get like a 11, 10%, Vino Verde, for example. Portuguese wine I used to really enjoy. So different percentages, but it's also equivalent. This is probably a better gauge. 436 pints of beer per year, which is 8.3 pints per week. Have you ever, lived a lifestyle where about 8 pints was your average per week? Have you drank more than that in a week? I'd say most of you probably have. I've drank 10 pints of Guinness, and that's kind of my record a long time ago now. So yeah, I find that interesting. And when you think of alcohol, like pure alcohol, it's used in, you could run a car off it, for example. Ethanol, it's flammable. And if you ever lit a Christmas pudding, you put the brandy over it and warm it up and light it. There's a light flame, that's not hugely visible. There's no Only Fools and Horses where they put something on it and it was like torched. But if you ever lit pure alcohol, it's explosive. It's like petrol, like it will burn strongly. So when you consider 10.8 liters of this stuff, that's what's going through your body. Obviously, it's diluted. You're drinking vodka, is only 40% of it. You're drinking wine, 10 to 14% of it. But still, that's what's going into your bloodstream. You wouldn't imagine drinking, like if someone says you're drinking 6 liters of petrol a year, right? What's the difference? Obviously, there is a difference, but it's diluted and you're not even noticing it. So when you think of it from a health perspective, I think it's worthy to think about that. It kind of shocked me when I came across those figures. But no harm thinking about them. Another part of the context that we're discussing this here today, it's a major economic commodity. And Europe is like one of the powerhouses. It is the center of global alcohol industry. Europe is the largest market and it's the largest producer. Excise duty from alcohol sales in Ireland was like 830 million or so in 2012. Could be higher now, but think about that, not far off $1 billion. The VAT yield in 2011 from alcohol sales was $1 billion. So when you think about the government are getting in probably 2 billion or so a year from alcohol. Now, when you consider that when it comes to policy and all the rest of it, and obviously there's a cost to this that I'm not going to go through the figures of that estimated cost to society in terms of, the health industry, chronic disease, all the rest of it. Missed days from work, actually. But it's interesting, like how are we, what the government policy is going to be influenced by that. We get 2 billion in tax or from that, so their policies, of course, influenced as the marketing, the lobby, alcohol lobby is very powerful, of course, as well. Expenditure on alcohol marketing is around conservatively 115 million a year. So every single one of us has been exposed to alcohol advertising from birth. How many ads have you seen for alcohol? And they're everywhere and they're hugely powerful, hugely rich, profitable companies that really want you to spend your money on this product and drink more of it and drink it more regularly. Okay. And yeah, I have a picture there that I might pop up, but I heard it's quite interesting. I like watching the rugby. The Guinness Six Nations is coming up. When I was a kid, it used to be called the Five Nations. Then Italy joined. It was the Six Nations, but now it's the Guinness Six Nations. And yeah, a story that only came up there last week or two. At some stage during the Guinness Six Nations, at every match, there will be a Guinness Six Nations man of the match. And it's likely that Antoine Dupont, who is the French scrum half, and I think he's, if he's not World Rugby Player of the Year, I think he might be, but I think he's won it before. But he's one of the best. He is the Messi of rugby, I would suggest. But he will probably win the Guinness Six Nations Man of the Match. And if not, one of his teammates is going to win it at some stage. And on that, a Guinness representative will present him with his medal. But interestingly, the French Rugby Union have actually banned their team from consuming alcohol when they get together, okay, due to a few issues and incidents that have happened on tours, etc. So disciplinary incidents. And so the main sponsor will present the best player of the tournament, potentially, with the Guinness Six Nation of the match, but he's not allowed to consume the main sponsor's product, which I find quite interesting. And definitely, when I was growing up, I used to smoke cigarettes. And back then, I watched a bit of Formula One, and it was like watching little cigarette boxes driving around the track. Marlboro sponsored McLaren, Rothman sponsored Williams, but really they were heavily into sponsorship, and they obviously spent a huge amount of money on that because they know they're going to reach their target market. And when cigarettes, what are they trying to reach? They're trying to reach young people. They're not trying to convince some 48-year-old man to start smoking because he won't, okay? Generally speaking, it's the younger people who start smoking, 15, 16, whatever, 14 even. That's when we start smoking. Then we have that habit then because it's addictive. So it's fair to say the alcohol companies are doing the same thing. Do they want you drinking at 16? They just want you associating alcohol with the likes of their heroes. And that's what young people look up to. That's what I would have looked up when I was younger, and these sports people. And I just think it's interesting that it's allowed without the blink of an eye. We wouldn't allow, wouldn't be the Marlborough Six Nations or the John Player Blue Six Nations man of the match. It used to be in terms of snooker. You got the Benson and Hedges Masters, for example. So yeah, that's the context. I'm just explaining the context. Also, listen, it's a stressful, stressful living in this modern world, trying to earn a living, trying to run a business, trying to raise a family, cost of rent, cost of property, cost of living. It's just, life's stressful in this modern world. We know that. And alcohol is obviously the most readily available stress reliever. And when you drink that glass, and I know, I'm drinking. I was drinking an awful long time before ever questioning it. But it's probably the most readily available stress reliever, but it doesn't actually relieve stress. It does feel like it initially, but actually it adds to our stress. So this is the context we're looking at. In a summary for the context, which is important. So basically, it's a huge part of our culture. And we live in countries where alcohol consumption is excessive, extreme. Now, maybe you're living in a different country, maybe you're in the Middle East, etc. But if you're in the diaspora over there, you may be an exception to the rule of the general population. It's a big business. It's big business. As consumers, we are heavily targeted, and we've been heavily targeted from age one. I'm not saying that Guinness are going after toddlers. Heavily influenced, to say, this is all going into our subconscious. We're taking on these memories all the time. Modern day stress, of course, is real. Alcohol is the most commonly used stress reliever, and humans are tribal beings. the tribe drink, right? 75% or so of adults in Ireland drink, which is kind of interesting. I think that might even be down to 74, but a quarter of the adults in Ireland don't drink. And I think that number is growing. But we don't want to feel left out. And how I explain this is like, if you've read the book, The Chimp Paradox, it's a brilliant book. But essentially, we've evolved over millions of years. And when you go back a fair bit in our evolution, at one stage, we were these kind of tribal beings, still are. But to be left out of the tribe, you imagine Neanderthal, he's excluded from the tribe. He's on his own. It's very vulnerable. He's going to get, a saber-toothed tiger then after him. He's not going to survive. A chimp in the chimpanzee family, left out of the tribe, rejected from the tribe, he's going to survive. So we still have those animalistic instincts within us. We want to feel like we belong. Okay. So again, that is a reason why we don't want to stand out from the crowd. And we might think we're above this, but those deep-rooted feelings are there. And definitely I found support, to be fair, from when I took a break. But on occasion as well, I was pressured, and people didn't really understand that they were pressuring me. But I did feel kind of like I was made to feel highly unusual because I made a decision to take a break from this drug that causes so many issues. Okay. And so that's the context. Now I have some questions for you. And when I did this in the training with a live call, I'd play a bit of music for a couple of minutes and we would spend time writing them. So I definitely invite you to write these out. Now you can listen to the whole podcast. The questions will be in the show notes. And at some stage, definitely I suggest you write it out because then you really think about it. But what I'll do is I'll read out the question. You can either pause, answer the question, or do them later. But I'll give my answers. And basically, the advantage of pausing is you're not influenced by my answers. But either way. So question 1, what is the longest you've gone alcohol-free in your adult life? That's not going to take you too long to answer. You probably have a answer there. And I think I covered this in the last podcast, but briefly for myself, when I took the challenge, I'm about 8 weeks off being 48, so I'm 47. I was 39 when I did the challenge, so I'm a good 8 years at this, What is the longest you've gone alcohol-free? And my answer was, at the time, 39, jeepers, maybe a month, And I couldn't even remember doing a month, but maybe a month. 2, 3, 4 weeks, maybe a month or so. Next question. Can you recall deciding to drink regularly as an adult? And I want you to, again, pause and have a think about that. My answer was no. Okay? Because I was under 18 the first time I consumed alcohol. And yeah, with most of my mates, I was told it was 15, I think we started drinking, but say 16 and definitely 17 regularly, So I made the decision as a child, as an adolescent, when being part of a group, the tribe, is hugely important. You'll see that I have a teenager now, and over the next few years, her opinions of her friends and those her age is going to be way more valued or important to her than me. And that's just how it is when we grow up, at that time, you'll see, you might see a lot of young 16, 17-year-old lads, and they're all wearing the same stuff, same with the girls, because they want to fit in, So I started drinking because, I'm in Ireland, going back to the map. And yeah, I didn't make a conscious decision of an adult. So I arrived at the point when I was 39, when I saw this challenge, and I began to learn about my connection with alcohol, my relationship with alcohol, which was part of the title. And what astounded me when I thought about it is jeepers, I have not even made it a conscious decision to consume this drug heavily and regularly. And I'd been consuming it for approximately quarter of a century at that time, without question. And I just found that bizarre. I hadn't even questioned it. Okay, so if you recall, deciding to drink regularly as an adult, great. It's an interesting one. I would suggest most of us haven't, and that the vast majority of us got into alcohol as teenagers because everyone else was doing it, and we just continued that without really considering it to the point where we are now. I would suggest that's the norm or the majority. Could be wrong. The next one, probably a quite obvious one, is why do you drink alcohol? What would you say the top 1 to 3 reasons here? So you can pause, have a think. I'm going to have a quick drink of water. I've thought about this deeply. Okay. Some people say, well, I like it. I love X, Y, and Z. The top 2 reasons are, number 1, because I live in a country that vast majority of people drink excessively. So I'm Irish. That's the number 1 reason I drink. If I was living in Saudi Arabia, if I was born in Saudi Arabia, if I was born in all of these other countries that rarely drink, yeah, I probably wouldn't drink. So the number 1 reason is I live in Ireland. Number 2 reason is and I actually don't drink anymore. But what before I took the challenge at 39, the second reason was it was an ingrained habit. So I started when I was 16-ish, and I'd been drinking probably weekly since about 17. Right? So you imagine doing something every week, oftentimes more than once a week. Imagine doing that for 25 years. If you want to ingrain a habit, that's how you do it, right? That is hugely ingrained. So it can be very difficult to get away and change ingrained habits. And now I want to move on to some really good questions. A lot of people never weigh up the pros and cons of certain things they do in their lives. And what we can do, we can think about, I might join the gym. And yeah, I might join the gym. The pros are, yeah, I'm going to get fit, whatever. But it's a cost. And what if I don't go? And I went before and I felt that, maybe I won't bother. So that isn't weighing up the pros and cons. That's going with the feeling that or the thought that create a feeling that you had when you decided to make a decision. So you're not really weighing it up, right? Sometimes we go with what we think of last, right? Rather than weighing up all the pros and cons. And it sounds simple, but we've used this with loads of clients for loads of different things. And just what are pros and cons? Be methodical. Write out your pros and cons. And it actually helps people do all sorts of things. So what are the pros for you to continue to drink at your current level? List them out. What are the cons for you to drink at your current level? List them out. Be detailed with this. Be fair, be open-minded. What are the pros for you to reduce the level you currently drink at, or take a prolonged break from drinking alcohol? And what would the advantages of that be? So this way we can concentrate and focus on all the advantages. Now, I've done this, so I'll share a bit of mine. And what are the cons for you to reduce the level of your current drink at, or take a prolonged break from alcohol? So what are the cons of taking a break? What have you got to lose? Yeah, we had a good discussion on this. But essentially, the pros of drinking alcohol for myself, it's a social lubricant, certainly a stress-reducing feeling initially. It's a mood changer temporarily. Mood the next day is pretty bad. It reduces inhibitions, which positive, but also has negative results. If you have too much at the Christmas party coming up to Christmas, you might say things that you wake up and regret the next day. Easier to talk to members of the opposite sex. I'm thinking back when I was younger. Help us fit in to be part of the tribe group, which we spent a bit of time on. Tastes nice, not initially. Very few people enjoy their first drink. Whiskey isn't usually what teenagers drink. It's cider or sweeter drinks. We can acquire a taste in time, but actually what I've experienced, we can unacquire that taste also. And it can be fun in the short term. Okay. You're going to have different ones though. Okay. So it's important, your reasons, what motivates me. It's going to be different what motivates you. Likewise with these reasons. Okay. Then there's the cons. For yourself, like it disrupts sleep. You just cannot get deep restorative sleep. You just cannot do it with alcohol in your system. And so many people have said this to me because they, clients who have whoops and all of these things, and their sleep score is just shockingly bad. Right now, they might sleep for like 8 hours, or you can be conked out. Um, but yeah, you cannot get that deep REM restorative sleep. So you wake up, you're not going. You might be your eyes closed and asleep for a long time, but it's not good quality. It's toxic, so the body sees it as a poison. Okay. And yeah, we're discussing this. I was discussing this with Dan off podcast. I recall when I was about 15 or 16, we were on holidays. I think it was Spain or Portugal. And we met up with some friends and we went out. My brother's a bit older, so yeah, he would have been probably 18. And there was two brothers who were similar ages. And we went and got a vodka and Coke. And I drank the vodka and Coke, and I'd never drank vodka before, and thought it actually tasted. I was kind of kidding myself, but with the ice and loads of Coke, yeah, that's not bad. So I kind of knocked it back, and then I got a kind of rumble in my stomach, Anyway, I had to run to the bathroom, and I projectile just vomited it all up. So when you think about that, the body, like what's happening there, the stomach is like has this poison arrive. Signal goes up to the brain. Listen, we have just ingested poison, and if you know before you vomit, your mouth, the saliva will come. That horrible feeling. You're sick at home, and the saliva will come, and that's like lubricating the esophagus, and then your stomach will contract and it will just expel it. So that's just a good reaction of a healthy 16-year-old boy who never drank vodka before. That's just a human reaction. You've ingested vodka. What the hell is this stuff? That's what our body's saying. Get this stuff out of me. Okay. And so the body sees that as poison because it is a poison. It's calorific, yet no nutrients. I think it's about 700 calories in wine, for example. I think about 200 in pints, and I've talked to people who are trying to lose weight and they're drinking 10 pints or drinking 2,000 calories in pints. And it's hard. It's like, especially as you get older, to lose weight whilst wasting so many calories on that, for example. Loads of other reasons. It's a neurotoxin. I'll talk about that later, but basically, yeah, it's toxic for our brain. It causes several cancers: mouth, throat, liver, breast, bowel. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this, but I see there's a particular cancer event every year, and I know a lot of people who go to it, and it's all over social media, and it's to raise awareness, and it's I think it's for certain cancer research, but they're all the pictures I see on social media. I remember seeing it one year, and everyone's standing around with glasses of wine, glasses of prosecco, at this cancer fundraiser that is to raise money for cancer research, but the cancer research has linked breast cancer, for example, or liver cancer, has linked alcohol consumption to these diseases. So that's what research is saying. So it just sounded a bit funny. It's like, here I am at the lung cancer convention, and we're all sitting around having a cigarette. That would be very odd, but it's not in this situation. So again, probably going back to a bit of the context, how it sits in our subconscious, how it sits in our memory. All right. And it's unlike any other drug. It's drugs and alcohol. It's excluded from a drug, even though it is a drug. It causes other diseases. Alcohol-associated hepatitis, high blood pressure, weakens the heart, linked to depression, mental health issues, and suicide. I kind of covered that in a big detail. It's hugely linked to mental health and suicide issues. A cause of stress. So it's oxidative stress on the body. As soon as you drink, you are under stress. And, John Tui, our nutrition lifestyle coach, talks about, he's the stress bucket. He describes this in one of his trainings. And the stress bucket is, imagine a bucket filling up with rain. And if it overflows, the rain is the stress. If it overflows, that's when you're like at your limit. Obviously, stress is poor for your mental health, physical health, etc. And so we need these stress relievers, taps on the bucket, an umbrella, so we can have all these strategies to manage our stress. And again, we talked about stress being just omnipresent for us adults in this modern world, but it's a cause of stress. So, for example, if I'm waking up on a Sunday morning and I have a bad hangover because I had a rake of pints the next day, but I have stuff to do, I have to go, maybe to the in-laws, I've to drop the kids certain places, I have to do X, Y, and Z. My bucket is already high. Okay, so there's not much room for error there before it overflows. So it is a cause of stress, physiologically and mentally. Reduces our ability to take on more stress. All right, affects our ability to focus, and the mood next day is affected, and it increases anxiety. The fear. People talk about the fear, and I remember this badly. This one weekend, we went over to London to a friend of mine who was living over there. We were in our mid-20s, and it probably took years off our life. It was ridiculous. Like, there was, I remember some Sauvignon Blanc came out for breakfast, and we literally drank it for breakfast. It was just horrendous. But we were talking about the next week, all of us were just in rag order for a whole week afterwards. Never again. Yeah, so diseases, illness is caused by, I mentioned these, cancer, we've mentioned all of them, digestive problems, weaker immune system. Like, when you weaken the immune system, obviously we're open up to so many other issues: stroke, high blood pressure, binge, heavy drinkers more likely to develop dementia. Like, there's just so much to it. I don't want to list everything because I'll be here all day. What I will do is I might pop this, on the YouTube channel. I'll pop this infographic up, because when I was doing my research, and I think it's very useful to do this. Like, people say, I know, but like, to really like spend time and consider all of these ill effects, because now that I have on several occasions, and I'm really enjoying living alcohol free, I'd love to have a conversation with myself back in my 20s and say, listen, look what you're doing here. But I wasn't considering it. It's like I was blind to it, for a lot of the reasons I've mentioned previously. But how alcohol affects the brain. And this is from the HSC. Alcohol is a neurotoxin, and that's in bold, a neurotoxin. It can damage brain cells and blood vessels and stop new brain cells from developing. Alcohol use has lasting effects on our brain. There is no safe level of alcohol use for the brain. And then it has like non-alcohol use, low alcohol use, moderate, and high. So what it says about, let's just go for moderate: changes to the way the brain works that can cause a range of problems. High can permanently damage the brain. So I'm not sure what they think is high. Like, is 8.3 pints a week high, which is the equivalent of, what do we say, 10.3 liters of pure alcohol per year, right? So imagine drinking, like, say you take a month or two off, but 10 months of the year, you have this liter of pure, highly flammable alcohol. And throughout that month, you have to somehow consume that. You mix it in with everything. That's interesting, because that's a poison, if you drank it all, you're gone. So there's more on that. Again, I'd invite you, just to educate yourself on this. Relationships. That's one of the pillars we talk about for our ideal self is, your relationships. Your health is underlying it, but your relationships with your spouse, with your partner, with your children, with your friends, with your family. It's one of the pillars of our lives. If we want to be our best self, we have to look after these pillars. So how does alcohol affect your relationships? Okay. For myself now, again, I'm coming up to 2 years without having any alcohol, and I absolutely love it. I'm doing it because I absolutely love it. And it was difficult at the start, but yeah, I used to drink heavily, and we used to have, more so me, I used to have drunken arguments with my wife where we'd have some misunderstanding about something stupid because my brain wasn't functioning properly. You have all this poor judgment, sluggish system, clumsiness. So I'd have this drunken argument over nothing, and then we apologize the next day and really confused over to why we had the argument. And then, the weekend can be ruined. Can happen with, obviously, lots of other friends, family, etc. And even like, when I was looking at this, we did some slides. I might show this one, but there's a picture of a guy when I was looking for a hungover dad. And I've been there, but not an awful lot, to be honest with you. My kids now are, he's 13 and Maya's 8, going on 9 in a few weeks. So I'm 8 years not drinking. So Maya has never really seen me. I've had a few drinks over the last few years, but it's never been a big part of her growing up, seeing me drink alcohol. And Lily a bit more, but again, 13, she would have been what, 8 or so, when I made the first decision to take a break. But yeah, there's a picture of a guy and he has like these funny kids sunglasses on, with his daughter, and they're watching Frozen. It was on TikTok I came across, but I remember just being hungover the next day. And if you're busy in this and you're a parent, you're a working parent, 5 days a week, you're out, you're working hard, you're trying to provide for your family. And then it's a weekend, so you get a bit of chance, and they're at school, etc. You get a chance to spend time with them. And you go out Saturday night, maybe you do something fun Saturday. Then Sunday, you're like destroyed, or just don't even have to be completely destroyed. And I found this after just having a few drinks. After a while, my body was just so sensitive to it. It's tainted. That precious time with my daughters is tainted. That Sunday is tainted because I'm hungover. Maybe I'm not like, I'm more irritable. I'm less patient. Again, we talk about the ability to tolerate stress. My mood, my energy is lacking. I can't be fun. I can't be as fun as I would be anyway. And we talk about, like at the start, the statement was, if you're drinking alcohol regularly, especially at a decent level, the level that we talked about there, or even approaching it, it is holding you back from being your best. How could you argue with that? Dad, you're so fun when you're hungover. No child ever, So yeah, has alcohol negatively impacted upon your relationships? Write down some details of examples if it has, right? Like be honest with yourself. Like write them down. Because what we're good at is trying to forget things, embarrassing things that happen to us. But it's like, if you have pain from making mistakes like this, use that pain. If you're embarrassed, if you're ashamed of things you've done, don't necessarily, or I suggest maybe we shouldn't just swipe it under the rug there. If we can explore that and learn from that, that's where personal growth comes from. Listen, everyone makes mistakes. I would say vast majority of people in Ireland have made, a jackass or embarrass themselves at some stage around alcohol. And it's cool, a lot of times you might have been at a wedding or whatever and no one really noticed, you think, because everyone else is the same kind of level, okay? And finally, well, not finally, there's a couple of more things, but what I want to share, and if you check out the YouTube channel, we'll pop this image up, is the allegory of the cave. And just Google image, search that, and you will see Plato's allegory of the cave. So it came from Plato, okay? And he uses the allegory of the cave for explaining the human condition, explaining human behavior, human psychology. And I only came across this a couple of years ago. But when I learned about it, I immediately related it to my own journey, and I'll explain a little bit. So if you can look at the picture, great. If you can't, I'll try and explain it somewhat. But there's a cave underground with an entrance at the top. And there's a wall in this cave. On one side of the wall, there are prisoners with their back to the wall, and they're looking up at these shadows of objects that are cast from these men in hoods who are holding these objects on sticks on the other side of the wall. And there's a fire to their side, which is casting that shadow. Now, these prisoners, these men, have been in this cave their entire life, right? They've been brought up in this cave. This is the environment they're familiar with. It's the only environment they're familiar with. This is normal for them. They can hear the voices from the other men behind, but they think the voices which are echoing around the cave are coming from the objects. The objects to them are real. That is reality, okay? This environment is what they're familiar with, okay? And they can't see the other men. And within that, Plato has shown there's one of the prisoners, and he's showing him walking through the cave, and he's trying to get up to the entrance. And at the entrance to the cave, he's shielding his eyes from the light coming in from outside. Then he shows the prisoner who's gotten out of the cave. Okay. And what Plato argues is when the prisoner gets out of the cave initially, he's frightened, right? He's in this alien environment, this really unfamiliar environment. The light is hurting his eyes. The open spaces are intimidating and frightening. The weather, the wind, the conditions, the elements are hugely unfamiliar. And he feels really uncomfortable. He feels like a fish out of water. And he actually wants to be back into the cave. He craves the familiarity of the environment that he's existed in his whole entire life. Now, he doesn't go back to the cave. He sticks it out. And in time, his eyes adjust to the light. He adjusts to the sunshine. He adjusts to the new environment. He gets used to the conditions. And he actually starts to enjoy them. And he's thinking, this is actually much better than the cave. The conditions here, the atmosphere, the environment, I much prefer this to the cave. Now, he had to go through some pain to get there. And then he's like, right, well, actually, now that I want to know this, all my friends are in this cave and they have no idea what it's like up here. I'm going to go down and I'm going to convince them to come up here. So he goes down, and what Plato argues is that this man who has been free from the cave cannot convince his friends to come out with him. They're like, what? That doesn't sound nice. Talking about the great open spaces, the sunlight hurting his eyes, this wind and rain, it's just completely unfamiliar. Like, we've been here our whole lives. They crave familiarity, and we do. We change is difficult, even when change is healthy and positive, because us as humans crave the familiarity. So yeah, that's Plato's argument. And what I realized was that was me in that cave when I was consuming alcohol regularly. It was all I ever knew. It was, again, it's not like alcohol was introduced to me when I was 16. I've been surrounded with it because I live in a country, Ireland, that has just been normal. It's deeply ingrained in my subconscious, in my memories, the smell of it, everyone else drinking. That so much so that I went from 17 to 39 consuming pretty much weekly this toxic drug without even making that choice as an adult. And I just assumed that it enhanced my life. I didn't even question it, and then when I did question it and got out, I realized that living alcohol free, I much prefer it, right? And it surprises me to say this, and it's been surprising me for 8 years. But I love living alcohol free. And what Plato describes is this philosopher's burden. Okay, so this guy who has gotten out of the cave, he has this burden now because, like, he knows it's so much better up there. It's so much better. It's so much more enjoyable. His state of being, his mental health, everything. He's not stuck in this goddamn cave, dark and gloomy and whatever. But he goes down to convince his mates, and he can't convince his mates. They won't leave the cave. So that's how I feel a little bit. I've spoken. I've had people come to me who, a question I was considering asking is like, do you have an open mind? And I would suggest you ask that to 10 people, and 8 to 10 people will say, yes, I have a very open mind. But can we? And this isn't a critique, but when you look at the culture, when you look at what you've been brought up in, when you look at what's familiar with you, all the memories ingrained, I liken the subconscious, and I learned this from a fantastic mindset coach I worked with years ago. An iceberg, your mind is like an iceberg. The subconscious is the 80% below water, all right? 80 to 90% below water. Your conscious mind is the 10 to 20% above water. It's very hard for the conscious mind to influence the subconscious mind. If the subconscious is going in one direction, it's very hard for the conscious mind to change it, all right? So there's things we need to do to become aware of this. What was it, that quote? Was it Carl Jung? until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we'll call it fate. Okay. So I had to get out of the goddamn cave. I had to go through that hardship, that awkwardness, telling people that I'm taking a break, the trickiness. I had to get out of that to experience it. But even when I did, and this is what I talked about earlier, when I mentioned you can only learn more about a subject, you can't learn less. I had gone at age 39, I went 9 months alcohol free. I had 2 glasses of wine, and then I went another 3 months, and then I came to Christmas and I had like 1 or 2. I go another 6 months. Then I might go another 3 months. It was always a couple of glasses of wine, nothing mental, not like the old days. Then it might be 9 months. And I've been doing this. I did that for 6 years, but I kept on going back to having 1 or 2. And I didn't really consider it. It's like, yeah, I'm just having 1 or 2. But every single time I went back, it was like, that didn't taste as nice as I remembered. That was an anticlimax. The next day I felt tainted. I get a hangover very easy now. I'm not dying, but still, the next day tainted. I was like, ugh, just feeling blah. So why the hell was I doing it? Like, I know I love living alcohol free. And I think what it was just that huge subconscious. It was just so ingrained in me over so long of a period. And what was interesting is when I got the 22 months I'm at now, I'll be 2 years in January. What I found was I was away in Portugal during the summer and at a nice restaurant, people around me are drinking wine. I always thought that when I was drinking, that Portuguese wine was as nice as any, the Alentejo Red or a Douro. But for the first time, I wasn't even tempted. And I didn't mind being tempted before because I'd get the temptation, but, let it pass, surf the urge, and you'd be fine. But this time I wasn't even tempted. And I think it's just the pure amount of time I've acquired a taste for living alcohol free. If we start talking about acquiring the taste for alcohol, I've acquired that taste now again, like I had when I was a kid, and I absolutely love it. That's something maybe I don't explain it enough, but physically, I just feel way more energetic. I hated the anytime I went back, that dull feeling. Sharper, better focus, all the physical elements, but even the brain elements. I want to express that to anybody that's interested, but I can't express it. I can't explain it. It'd be like me trying to explain what it's like. I'm trying to think of an example. In Fiji, I went to Fiji for a few weeks, right? If you've never been to Fiji, I could explain it to an extent, but you'd have to be there to meet the people, to see, the environment, the islands that are on, to see the just how friendly they were. You're better off experience. Some things you have to experience to understand. And that's why I'm on to the last part of the podcast, which is experiment options. If you've listened this far, you're probably curious, what would living alcohol free be like, to the point where you're not even tempted. You've gone so far away from it that you've gotten over this sticky bit at the beginning, this sticky bit of, dealing with all the difficulties, because it is difficult. It's like going to the gym initially or starting to swim. Changing ingrained behaviors isn't easy. So there's some experiments. Experiment number 1, change nothing, continue as you are. And hopefully you've answered the questions, okay? And 100% do that. It's your life. You're probably an adult listening to this. Number 2, reduce your overall intake of alcohol. And I think this is important because, when you think of stages of change, sometimes this might be just a seed that, you've consumed and that will sit in your mind for some time. But, maybe it will grow. Maybe you'll begin to change. You'll go into this, what we call it, the stages of change model: pre-contemplation, contemplation, planning, action. So that's the stages of change model. So it might just be like a seed. Yeah, so you could reduce your overall intake, and that's still progress. So, a client came back. I mentioned on the training that, I used to smoke cigarettes, going from 20 a day to 10 a day. 10 cigarettes a day isn't good for you. 20 today to 10 a day is progress. Okay. you're headed in the right trajectory. Then going from 10 to like 3 or 4, headed in the right direction. Then going from like, 2 or 3 a week. Yeah, that's all headed in the right direction until finally you give up, right? And so what is your trajectory? So yeah, just reducing is going to be beneficial. But then you could take a complete break, You could take a break for a month. And I think a lot of people do that, but I'm not sure we all do it correctly. Like we can take a break, I'm not going out in November and going, drive January or whatever. And I'm not just not going out. I'm not going to see any of my friends. I'm not going out to the pub, not going out to dinner. I'm going to lock myself away and, there you go. I get through the 28 days. And then when you do go out, you'll fucking go on a mad one because you've all that pent up. But what can happen is we associate not drinking with not seeing our friends, not going out, not having fun. So that's what we can do. And I think that's a mistake. I'd suggest going out, telling your friends that you're taking a break, or stealth drink, have a few non-alcoholic beers, drive. There's loads of tactics you can do, and you can look up other resources on that. There's plenty of online. And so, yeah, take a break for 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and be kind to yourself. Like whatever you commit to, if you break it, don't worry about it. Again, think of, like I've explained, I started this journey 8 years ago, and it's only the last 2 years that I haven't drank anything. And even if I was doing what I was doing up until 2 years ago, drinking a couple of beers or a couple of glasses of wine once every 3 or 6 months, that's not really much of a impact on my health. It's just I love it so much that now I'm completely alcohol free. What else was there? That's pretty much what I wanted to explain. Like there are a number of questions there. I would remind you that, to really get the most out of these, if you really want to consider something, you can listen to a podcast, sure, but consider it, careful thought over a period of time. Maybe ponder those questions. Maybe put the pen to paper on a few of them. And there's loads more research sources out there. If you go have a search online, taking a break. There is an interesting idea that, there's the middle lane of drinkers. What we mean by that is they're not alcoholics. I'm not alcoholic. And although I understand it's on a spectrum, addiction's on a spectrum. So there's people on the high end, people only drink a little bit, but there's the middle lane of drinkers. And these are people who are the 8.3 pints a week. They're just doing that consistently. And the argument or statement is, which you can argue, of course, that drinking alcohol regularly is holding you back from being at your best. So why not give it a break? Why not give it a shot? I found one quote. I'll finish with this. Steve-O from Jackass, if you remember him, he did some crazy stunts, absolutely mad stuff. But it came to a head when he was off his head on drugs, and he had a couple of apartments, and he was going to, like, at the top floor, he's going to ride his motorcycle down and set up a ramp, and he's going to basically try to land on an apartment block on the other side, or something crazy like this. Might have been off the roof. But yeah, Johnny Knoxville came over, and basically they had an intervention. And I was like, Steve-O, and you could check out his podcast. Steve, listen, you're going to die if you keep this kind of stuff up. So he actually went into recovery pretty much straight away. And as far as I know, he never drank again since that day. But he has a pretty cool podcast. But what he explains is, and again, I'm not an alcoholic, I know it's on a spectrum, but what he said was he's glad he's an alcoholic. And why he's glad he's an alcoholic is because he had to give it up 100% completely. Not easy. Still finds it difficult on occasion. But he was glad that he didn't just drink enough, 8.3, 2 bottles of wine a week, whatever it was. He wasn't just drinking enough like us, which I was, a middle lane drinker, that it was just stopping him from being his best. So he wasn't as productive. He wasn't really his authentic self. He was numbing himself. He was using it to get away from his problems. It was adding to his stress. He couldn't be I'm not sure if he's a parent. He couldn't be as good a parent or partner or whatever as he could, because these couple of drinks, these 40 bottles of vodka a year on average that most of us drink in Ireland, is just suppressing that. Okay, I know it's not for everybody, but I needed to share this, because again, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. So why not give it a shot? Have a break. I'll leave it at that. Cheers.